Hi honey bunnies, this is going to be a video response to a video that Thorn from Drawing Canars made. I'm going to link to that video below, and in that video she basically discusses some thoughts and feelings she has about people setting themselves up as teachers in the craft, kind of putting themselves out there as guides, and her feelings about how that might sometimes come from an egoic place and is more about that person's sense of need to be validated than it is about love for the material and about genuinely wanting to be of service. And she mentioned me in that video with regard to my teaching of tarot, and I think that's because I commented on her video that she made previously, in which she states that she would have told her younger pagan self that you don't need to be a teacher. You don't need to be a teacher just because you're a pagan, just because you have an interest in the subject doesn't mean that you necessarily have to teach it. And I thought that was quite interesting because I think it, to me, since I've been online, it does seem pretty rife, this idea that if you've read a few books about the craft and you've been doing it for a couple of years, it's now time to teach it. And actually that's obviously not necessarily the case, and in some ways it can create a lot more teachers than there are students. And also, of course, after practicing the craft for 3 or 4 years, I think, as she said in the previous video, I'll link that below as well because it's well worth watching. It's like advice that she gives to her younger pagan self. It's really cool. I'll probably do the same thing actually when I turn 30 in December, because it's a really fun concept. But yeah, she kind of mentioned that, just because you've picked up a few books on the subject and you've been doing it for a few years doesn't mean that you automatically need to graduate into this kind of teaching status and kind of start regurgitating or pumping out what you know for people that are new to the path or whatever. And I think that that is an assumption that's kind of made. But I also think teaching a lot of the time comes from a place of passion. It comes from a place of just wanting to impart information in the spirit of exchange and in the spirit of having that information flowing around and flowing around as freely as possible. And for my part, Thorn, you asked a few questions at the end of your video about teaching. You asked, was there a point when you realised that this was something you wanted to do? These are questions that are directed at teachers in general. And did it just start happening? Well, for my part, those two questions are kind of intertwined, because there was a point at which I realised that I wanted to teach tarot, but I also did fall into it. So it kind of came in the wrong order. When I first came onto YouTube, my first few videos were about tarot, and they were done in very much a teaching capacity. And if you watch them, I'm not suggesting you watch them, but anyone who has watched them will know that they're very stiff. I don't say, hi everyone, my name is Kellyanne, I'm here, for this reason, to kind of seek community or whatever. I don't say anything like that. I just go straight into talking about negative cards and how you can reinterpret them. And the reason I did that is because I find it kind of weird just talking to myself. If you start a YouTube channel and you have no subscribers and it's kind of like an echoey empty room with just you in it, that's how it feels, kind of on a it's kind of psychically speaking. It's just a big empty room with just you in it. For me, it kind of feels weird to address people that aren't actually there. And I was really, really green about this YouTube thing. I mean, of course I'd watch YouTube videos, but I never thought that I would start a YouTube channel. I really wanted to enjoy a sense of community with tarot, because I had come out of quite a stringent period of study. So I've been studying tarot for 15, nearly 16 years now, but I'd come out of a period of really intense study that I kind of put upon myself to help me to evolve so much more and to help me to get so much more connected to the cards. And as a result of that, I really felt this desire for community. I felt this hunger to speak to other people who were into tarot. But I kind of, when I first came onto YouTube, I didn't really want to kind of comment underneath other people's videos and try and forge a sense of community that way. I just wanted to put myself out there a little bit and see whether or not I actually wanted to keep the channel, because I was very unsure really of whether or not I actually wanted to do this. It just seemed like a good idea. I'd been doing the blog for quite a while, and that had given me some sense of community, but I really felt like YouTube was going to be the next thing. I felt like I wanted it to be interactive. I liked this idea of video responses, and I'd been lurking on a few witchy channels and pagan channels for a while, and I was still actually at that point very unsure about whether or not I wanted to discuss my spirituality at all, but I got into that fairly quickly because it is about that exchange, it is about being interactive, and I got the bug. I loved it. So my first few tarot videos are instructional, but it was never intended as a kind of teaching mechanism. It was purely because I know a lot about tarot. Tarot is a lot less of a vulnerable subject for me than my spiritual pursuits and my spiritual feelings, so it made sense to start the channel talking about something that, you know, is just, I suppose you could say, esoterically academic. There's nothing there that's going to make me vulnerable. There's nothing there that's going to make me feel like, wow, I really went out of the box there, and now I want to put myself back in that box. There was nothing like that. It was just like, look, this is something that I can tell you about tarot, some knowledge that I can impart. So really it came out of this sense of just being a fish out of water and wanting to talk about something that was easy, that was straightforward for me, that might be helpful to people, and might kind of just put me out there, dip my toe in the water as a person that's interested in tarot, and then hopefully attract people that are interested in tarot to come and talk with me. How I realised I wanted to teach tarot was actually at the behest of a great many people. I did several more tarot videos. I did a video about designing your own spreads, and I did videos about this and that aspect of it. And what I noticed was that people were commenting saying, these videos are great, but I'm actually not at that stage yet. You know, can you not do some beginner videos? Can you not talk about things that are kind of more standard, like the meanings of the four suits, the four elements in the four suits, that kind of thing? And I realised that actually what I was doing was I was making content for an audience that probably wanted to watch it, but couldn't get a handle on it so much. And the requests that came in kind of made me feel like maybe I should just ask people if they want a beginner's course. And it was not something that I wanted to do, actually. I thought it would be a lot of work. I don't really like rehashing over the basics of something. It's not something I enjoy doing. I find it, in a way, quite tiring. If you've got something so down that it's like breathing air, then rehashing it and explaining it to other people can actually be, as I'm sure you're aware from your time teaching, very tiring. And kind of you do worry about whether or not you're going to get it right or wrong, or how well you'll be able to explain it. So I made a video which was just about spiritual shizzle, and at the end of that video I said, like, some people have asked me if I could please do some beginner lessons. Is this something that you would be interested in? And I knew that I would have to present it as a course because there's way too much to explain to just do it as a few kind of lessons here and there in a kind of non-committed way. I knew it would have to be a course. That was how I always envisioned it if people said yes, and people overwhelmingly said yes. So really what I thought to myself was, this is a call to be in service. And I went with it, really. I started planning out the lessons and stuff like that. It was only when I got to the end of that 10-part course and I'd enjoyed it so much, and so many people had gotten so much out of it, and people had said to me, you know, I've cracked 100 books on this, but nothing really explained that particular concept to me quite the way that you did, and now I really feel that I've got a handle on it. That's when I thought to myself, there's something of value here. There's something that can really help people to experience tarot in the way that I feel that I do. So for me, it really was, as you said in your video, love of the material. I felt that it was kind of, I was pushed kind of begrudgingly almost into the idea of teaching beginner lessons. People requested beginner lessons, and I thought, wow, this is something people really need. You know, it would be stupid of me not to do this. It would be selfish of me not to do this. I mean, how hard can it be? So I started planning these lessons, but it was really only when I got to the last lesson, lesson 10 in the Trainee Tarot course, that I thought to myself, let's go on from here. Let's do other stuff. Let's show people spreads, and, you know, let's exchange more information, and I will be kind of this person that's imparting everything that I know for nothing, for no gain for myself, just because I'm aware that it's helped people, and I'm delighted that it's helped people. So I fell into it and then decided upon it. I liked it. I got a taste of it, I liked it, and it helped people, and it's still helping people now. I still get messages now from people who've just completed it and said it's one of the best free resources out there, and that means a lot to me. Now, that's not to say that teaching doesn't involve some kind of egoic stuff, because I think it does, and I think that doesn't always necessarily have to be bad. But I think it's true that if you start to teach something and you have a knack with it, and you have a certain way of presenting things which is very accessible, which people can really grasp onto and get the hang of, it does stroke the ego in a way, I think. But I don't think that necessarily has to be destructive, and I'm not saying that that is what you said, but I don't necessarily feel that has to be destructive, and I would like other opinions on this as well. Personally feel that I would be kind of weird and kind of non-human in a way if I wasn't proud and delighted by the award that I won at the end of 2013 from the Tarot Association, which I won for services to tarot, for teaching tarot on YouTube. And, well, I mean, it could also have been for my business, I don't know, but I very much doubt it. I feel that I won it primarily because of the teaching resources, in particular Trainee Tarot. And I think it would be kind of weird for me not to have a little a little moment of celebration for myself about that. It was affirming. It was a confirmation of what I'd done and the usefulness of what I'd done, and it was a confirmation of my ability to be able to teach something in a comprehensible manner. And that was lovely for me, and I did really enjoy that, and it did really make me want to teach more. It actually did. And what happened for me, actually, Thorn, when I watched your video, was that I stood back and thought about that for a second. And I thought, okay, what's the level of connection between the ego stroke and the desire to teach more, and the feeling of this stuff is useful, this stuff is helpful, therefore I must do it more, that feeling of being in service, you know, what's the connection, what's the balance? And actually, I would say personally that everybody has to look into their own heart for that. If you teach something and your resources are respected and people are getting something out of what you do and people are enjoying it and giving you that validation and saying, yes, I enjoy this, give me more, then I think everybody needs to find their own little part on that spectrum between enjoying the ego stroke and feeling that it validates you in some sense that you wouldn't get in some other way, and feeling that you like the sense of your own importance or whatever, and then this other side of the spectrum which is purely love of the material and desire to be in service. And I went within myself after I watched your video and I really thought about it, and actually I think I'm really comfortable on that spectrum. I think that there is clearly for me a love of the material, and you couldn't deny that. I mean, I light up when I talk about tarot. So many tarot nuts do. I mean, it's just such a magnetic, magnificent tool. But let's not go off track. So, you know, there is that feeling of just enjoying it, and I love being in service because I want people to feel the way I feel about it. And if people are struggling, if people have blocks, if people are not getting on with the books and they can get something from my method, I mean, I don't know how I would quite describe my method of teaching, but if somebody out there can get something from it that they couldn't get in any other way, then that to me is valuable. For example, with the court cards lesson that I did, I had a lot of feedback from people saying that they have tried and tried in vain to get a handle on the court cards, to really get a grip on the court cards, and they just couldn't do it, and my lesson actually allowed them to have a breakthrough. Now, my desire to teach more lessons to get that reaction from people is purely about being in service. If somebody's struggling with a tool that I so love and so cherish and so think that people can use for such positive stuff in life, then obviously, yeah, if they're getting something from my way of teaching, I'm happy to continue. But I would be lying if I said there wasn't also a part of me that when I won the award felt a sense of validation, but it was celebrated and it was taken as it was given. It was taken as a moment in time in which I was recognised for the work that I've done and for the usefulness and the effect that it's had. And I think the really important thing when something like that happens in your time of teaching is that you understand that you are also always a perpetual student. And that for me is the first rule. I don't want to get comfortable. I never have wanted to get comfortable. As far as I'm concerned, I'm still a novice. What I do know, I have the gift of perhaps being able to explain quite well. Because of the knack that I have with words, which is something that I've often been told about. I have no such knack with maths. I'm practically illiterate, but with words I can string a sentence okay, and I think that maybe that had something to do with it. But I think that basically what I can explain well, but that doesn't mean I know a lot. I still feel very much like I'm at the beginning of my path. I still have a long way to go, particularly with things like astrology and tarot, the Tree of Life and tarot. All of this stuff is still out there. I'm still a toddler, you know, I'm barely standing. That's how I feel. And I think if you keep that mentality of always yourself being a perpetual student, then not a lot can go wrong. For example, I was rereading the other day, was it Condensed Chaos by Phil Hine or Prime Chaos? One of the coyote manuals. The word is coyote, but I said coyote as in witchy. And he was saying that, you know, it's amazing how many occultists and how many teachers and how many spiritual gurus or whatever will never tell you, I don't know. And that's actually, you know, some kind of a disease for a teacher to not feel like not feel like being able to say, I don't know, I'll get back to you on that. That's actually a query for me too. I've never really come across that before. Now that's what you want. When people that feel they've graduated to the level of teacher no longer feel like they're also inherently themselves a student, I think that's where things can go really sour as well, because a teacher that doesn't know their shit, that sees themselves as graduated above the level of student themselves, will not admit that they don't know their shit. And that's really dangerous territory. That's where things start to go very wrong, and that's where things like, you know, that egomaniac kind of thing come in, where, you know, the teacher can do no wrong and the student can't ask any questions, and if the student asks questions and the teacher doesn't know, the teacher will come out with some BS. That's definitely an unhealthy vibe. And I do understand what you mean as well about teachers taking advantage of students. Either literally in that sense that you were talking about, which does go on in terms of the classroom setting and getting validation, getting sexual favours, getting into imbalanced relationships with students, riding on a student's admiration of them, that kind of thing, that is poisonous and that is pervasive. But this other stuff you were talking about, just the desire for validation on some kind of twisted wavelength, whereby the person that's the teacher kind of in some sense feels elevated or in some sense superior. And that can be really dangerous, because if you don't know something, you need to say, I don't really know something, I don't really know that, I can't answer that question for you. Quite often I need to say that with regard to tarot, because I feel that my specialities are in a way rather narrow. I like to combine tarot with certain psychological ideas and things like that, and a lot of other people like to combine tarot overtly with things like the Kabbalah and astrology. Now if somebody comes to me and asks me a very in-depth question about tarot according to the tree of life, which I'm learning, by the way, guys, give me time, or tarot according to astrology, I will direct them to someone. You know, if someone wants to know about tarot and astrology, I'll say check out Scarlet Moon. Like, he combines them so effortlessly. My ego isn't struck down by doing that. Not at all. I also have people that ask me whether or not I sell, you know, an astrology and tarot combination purchase on my shop. And I'll say, well, I have the birth card reading, but if you want something really in depth, here's a list of people that are incredibly adept at tarot and astrology and are selling readings or can help you. Again, my ego isn't struck down by that. I don't think that's a problem. And I think when you think that's a problem, that's where it starts to get really nasty. That's what I would say. You also asked non-teachers what kinds of things about the relationship are appealing or not appealing. That's interesting for me as somebody who teaches a subject, actually. I would say that there's nothing particularly unappealing about it, aside from the sense of responsibility that I perhaps feel, and also kind of sometimes having to form my own boundary with regard to how much I give of myself. I think that's important for all teachers to do and all people to do in general, is make sure your boundaries are okay, make sure you're giving only as much as you feel prepared to give and can give. So that's kind of important for me too. But I feel in most senses that it's incredibly appealing to be in the privileged position of teaching a subject that I feel incredibly passionate about, in the sense that I feel like it opens other people up to ways of thinking about tarot, and for me that in turn kind of restores the spiritual dignity of tarot, and that to me is a huge privilege. And so I think really in most ways it's very appealing. You also mentioned in your video wondering why you're bothered about people who teach the craft for presumably overtly egoic reasons, or who make very generalised statements about Wicca and clearly don't know what they're talking about. I would say that you care because you're passionate. You're bothered because you're passionate about it. And I think in a lot of ways anybody who's passionate about a subject and actually seeks to give their knowledge to others is bothered too by certain things like that. You know, somebody coming onto YouTube and professing to be a tarot teacher, and I don't know, I'm plucking something out of the air here because I've not actually seen any tarot teachers on YouTube that I'm irritated by, but it would probably be somebody who I don't know, is kind of looking off to one side to kind of like read some notes that are on the internet about what the different suits mean, and saying that pentacles are only about money. That would kind of irritate me. Maybe calling it tarot instead of tarot, and just really coming over in this teaching capacity whilst obviously being very green at it themselves. That would kind of bother me. And so I think if I came across something like that, yeah, of course, it would get on my nose, it would get under my skin. But I wouldn't react like you. I would kind of take it to a shadow workplace and then be like, look, you're strong enough in your court and not say something here. Just click away and get on with your life. So I think it's a good sign sometimes that we're bothered by people that we do not feel are adept to teach a subject that we're so passionate about. I think it's a good sign that it bothers us sometimes in a way. But I think what I really want to say is that, people choose the teacher that they're ready for. That's what I think is so important to remember sometimes, is that if somebody is a very considered student who really wants to get something out of the equation, who feels a passion for the subject and wants to break through some of those blocks and get to the next stage with it, they will go for a considered teacher who is also a perpetual student, who knows their shit inside out, who has a great passion for the subject and a great respect for the subject. So I really feel that the students go searching for the teacher that most resonates with where they are and how they want to be. If a student, a person who desires to learn about Wicca goes online and clearly selects a teacher that is ham-fistedly talking their way through something that they clearly don't understand the foundations of and can't explain the complexities of, then I would argue that that student is in a place where that teacher is appropriate, because they are not necessarily considered or curious or inquisitive themselves. I think that for me, when I seek out teachers, when I seek out free resources, I seek out these people who are clearly considered, who clearly have a passion for the subject, who are not dogmatic, who let me know that there are other ways of doing things and this is just their opinion, and then they lay it out for me in a very respectful way, which shows that they are connected to the material, that they are dynamic with their teaching of the material. And for me, I feel like that resonates with how I want to approach any subject that I'm fascinated by and interested in. I want to approach it in a dedicated, dynamic, but non-dogmatic and still very open way, and therefore that's the kind of teacher that I go after. So I really think that teachers and students resonate with each other in that way, and that's why I don't worry about misinformation, and I don't necessarily worry about people teaching from a place of pure ego. I don't worry about those things, because I really feel like the students that really want to learn about tarot in my case, or certain aspects of the craft in your case, the students that really want to learn about that from a pure place, from an unadulterated place of love for the material and desire to really understand, they will go for the teachers that are giving that in abundance. And so I don't really think that people can be misguided in that sense, because I think people link up with who they resonate with and the people that they're on that wavelength with. I wanted to say finally, before I stop this video, that there's a real backlash in some areas of the pagan community, certainly, against the word teacher in general, and I have noticed that. I would certainly describe myself as a teacher of tarot. I mean, to me that's just semantics, okay? A teacher is someone that imparts some kind of knowledge that they already have inside their noggin, and obviously in that way I'm a teacher. I think what people have done with the word teacher, I'm not saying in your case or in anyone else's case, but I notice people saying things like, I'm not a teacher, I don't want to be a teacher, I'm just giving my opinion, everybody else wants to be a teacher, I'm not that person, I'm not in that place, I don't want to be a teacher. Actually, I think that the word teacher doesn't need to have such a bad rep. I mean, I call myself a tarot teacher because the word teacher does what it says on the tin. It explains what I do with a lot of my content. I'm looking to impart my knowledge in a helpful way, in a productive way, which allows people to become expansive about the same tool that they love, that I love. You know, that's really it. So I'm a tarot teacher. It doesn't mean that I carry any sense of ego with me about that term whatsoever, because I'm also a tarot student. And I say this regularly. I always refer to people as my fellow tarot students, my fellow tarot nerds, because I'm never going to stop learning. I know that. You know, there are so many wormholes and so little time. You know, I've only got a few decades left with any luck. So, you know, I know that it's never going to be the end of the line for me. So for me, that backlash against the word teacher in general is really sad, because you know, I'm a teacher in some things and a student in other things, and a lot of the time I'm a teacher and a student in both. I think it would be really reductive to call yourself a teacher and not also be seeking new knowledge yourself and fresh understanding yourself. So I do have a problem with certain words. Like, I don't really enjoy people referring to themselves as a guru. I don't mind in a kind of tongue-in-cheek / light-hearted way somebody referring to somebody else as my guru outside of that classic Indian ashram vibe. I don't mind that, you know, like I will literally say, oh, he's my guru, but I don't mean it in that really like subservient way, like, oh, you know, his word is the law and I'm the guru, and he's the guru, sorry. I don't mind the use of the word guru in that way, like, I don't mind people saying that, but I am kind of bothered by people referring to themselves as a spiritual guru, like in their about pages and stuff. I am a spiritual guru, because I kind of wonder, can that ever come from anywhere that's not egoic? But again, I take it back to the self. For me, everything to do with anybody else on the planet is all about shadow work in essence, and everybody in essence in that case is my teacher. Everybody has something to teach me, from someone that treats me heinously and leaves me in the dirt as though I'm nothing, right up to people that I really admire, whose information I take on board, who I feel like their minds are just so expansive and so epic. Everyone has something to teach me. Everybody I come across in this world is a teacher. So in that sense, you know, when I come across people that refer to themselves as a guru and I think, why can that be? Can there possibly be any reason for that that isn't utterly egoic? Then I take that back to the self, and I just bring that back to searching myself and thinking, what does this mean for me that I'm having this thought? Like, what does it say about me? What is it that I could potentially learn here? And so shadow work kind of cures all ills as far as I'm concerned, and shadow work is the reason that I don't hit reply and send something heinous to somebody, or I don't really question somebody's motives out in the open, and I don't really, you know, judgment of people is important in some sense. You need to judge who to keep your distance from and who to move closer towards. You need to kind of have some intuitive sense of somebody's motives so you can work out what your terrain is in terms of the relationships in your life. And that's fine. I think in that sense it's fine. But if something really starts to get up my nose, I go down the shadow work route, and that's what I always do. And that's kept me out of a lot of hot water through the years. And I'll continue to do that. So yeah, sometimes I do feel intuitively from what has been presented in front of me that someone is coming from a purely egoic place. And yeah, it does worry me. And maybe sometimes it does bother me. But I just take it back to the core and know that the most important thing is to concentrate on what I'm doing with my practice, with my content, with my reasoning, with my intention, with my underlying motives. And as long as I'm clear on that, then the rest will surely follow. And, you know, you can only make change from within. So I tend to always go from within, and you know, I deal with my shizzle there and let everybody else deal with theirs, and I think you're doing a great job of that too. So that's all for now. Thank you very much for listening, Thorn, and everyone else who maybe could chime in. I don't know if you are a teacher of some kind. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. If you're a student of some kind, or if you have any strong emotional response to anything I've said, please comment below and we'll get into a dialogue. Much love, guys. Blessed be.